Thank you all for joining us here. Our session is Guardian Experience and Perspectives. Someone's cheering already. Thank you. My name is Keith Engel. I'm the Assistant Director with the Office of Elder Justice and the Courts, and I'm excited in the crowd I see a lot of people that are guardians. There's court staff here. There's people representing outside of Pennsylvania. So it's really the whole purpose of this session is to hear what guardians experience. As we heard in the last session, the plenary session, guardianship is a necessity in a lot of situations. It should always be the last resort. But what oftentimes we miss is what are professional guardians, family lay guardians, what are they really dealing with on a day-to-day basis? The courts see an annual report. They may hear testimony periodically from a guardian, but there's so much more, from dealing with banks, from dealing with medical institutions, from dealing with family members who are always so receptive to guardians. These are things that we really want to talk about today. The primary part of this panel is going to be a group discussion, kind of Q&A with the panel members here to really let them share what they go through from a professional perspective. And at the end, as long as time allows, we're going to try to build in some time at the end to open it up to Q&A for the rest of the audience. This is being recorded. And at the end with the Q&A, please ask away. That's an area that we're going to make sure we try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. And ultimately, this session runs up to lunch, so we don't want to keep you into lunch. So we will try to end right at 12:30. But I want to start by introducing our panel and possibly the hardest question of the whole day. Why did they get into this line of work? So if you could introduce yourself and why you became a guardian. Eric.
Hi, good morning. My name is Eric O'Connor. I'm the Executive Vice President of River Communities Fiduciary Services. We organized as a nonprofit organization back in 2016, and when we did that, we organized so that we could offer the Pooled Supplemental Needs Trust. So we knew we were going to be dealing with individuals with disabilities, and we knew that there was a great need for guardianship and guardians, and we got a lot of phone calls looking for guardian help, and so we decided to take on some cases, and that's kind of how we started in our guardianship endeavors.
I'm Edith Shapiro. I'm the owner and executive director of Generations Life Care. I have been a social worker for more years than I care to admit. We'll just say a few decades. And so when I was working as a medical social worker at a hospital, I was often tasked with doing all of the background necessary for putting together a guardianship and working with the legal department and being able to provide the testimony necessary. And so I kind of fell into it that way and ended up becoming a guardian myself once I left the hospital.
Hi, I'm Melissa Wise, Keystone Guardianship Services. And I thought a lot about this question last night when I was looking over it. And my only answer I came up with is that God has a crazy sense of humor because I never intended. My mom actually started the company in 2001, and I never, ever saw myself doing what she did. And somehow I got thrown into the position, had to learn the job on the job. Learn how to run a company, how to do HR. There's a lot more than just being a guardian. If you're running a guardianship company, we talked about some war stories last night at our table. So not just handling the clients, but your employees and dealing with all those things too. So I don't feel like I chose this. It kind of chose me by accident, but now I feel led to advocate for those who can't for themselves. So
I might agree with Missy here. My name is Dr. Paya Williams. I'm a physical therapist by trade. I've been a physical therapist for over 20 years. I worked in a hospital for 18 of those. I was a director of rehab for about 10 years. And I love working with the elderly population. Grew up with a grandmother and my mother. My grandmother was the youngest of her siblings, so she kind of took care of them, and I was around that environment. But I started it's a mess. My voice is a mess. So I started a physical therapy home care company and just doing treatments. And, some of my patients feeling like they could trust me and asking me to do things, and just realizing that a lot of people out here don't have family or people they trust that can help them. So that's kind of how I got into guardianship, working in the nursing homes, working in home care, and then people asking me to get in it. And I, like Missy, I feel like it shows me it wasn't something that I was really familiar with. And I kind of got into it just because I wanted to be there to help people. But it is a lot when you run your own building. It is more than just day-to-day helping individuals. So
Thank you to all the panelists. And really the first question, I want to open this up to the entire panel. What are some challenges that the audience may not realize that you face on a day-to-day activities as a guardian, and that other people in this room and others that will eventually watch this recording should know about the day in the life of a guardian? Edith, do you want to kick us off?
I suppose what I didn't expect maybe, and I see most of, is the always being on call. You know, we're responsible for people's lives, and people don't live from 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or 10 to 6. No, they live 24 hours. So we have to be available 24 hours a day, because, you know, when that medical emergency happens and you need to provide a consent for something emergent, my phone's ringing at 3 o'clock in the morning. I may not like it, but it's something that we have to do. It makes it challenging even when you try to take time off, or like, you know, my mother lives far away. She's all the way up in Maine. So, you know, I might try to take a few days off, get up, well, my phone's still ringing anyway, in spite of. And, you know, the universe and the doctors and everybody, and my clients especially, you know, they can't stop an emergency from happening. So it's just the always being on call. I think that, you know, just always being kind of hyper aware and needing to know your clients well enough that you can answer those questions in a moment that, you know, you normally don't have the chart in front of you to know the answers to.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of like medical shows. I don't really watch much of that, but I started watching the one, I don't know if you guys have seen it, it's called The Pit. And I watch it because it's film. Takes place in Pittsburgh, or supposedly, and so, you know, I like seeing references to the Pittsburgh area or whatever. But I'm watching it and I'm like, wow, this is kind of like, you know, I mean, not all every day, but we have days like that as a guardian where you're pulled in different directions, like almost simultaneously, and it's hard to manage. You have to be on top of it, like you said. You have to know your clients so that you could boom, 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 you know, and kind of move forward and put the right plan in place for them. I'm gonna give you an example here. This was Tuesday morning for me. So I reconcile our books every morning, all right, because as a nonprofit and very thin margins in the guardianship business, it's not a very good business model, I'll tell you that. You know, I wanna make sure that we're on top of the money situation. So I reconcile our books every morning. And then I have to reconcile it in QuickBooks as well. So I had about 70 transactions that I had to reconcile in QuickBooks, all right? And then at the same time, we've created a new debit card program for our trust clients and our guardianship clients and everything else. So I had to meet with a new employee that we have who is managing this process. And there were a couple things Monday night that were keeping me up about that transition. And I'm like, okay, let's make sure that we're all on the same page with these things. You know, so it took about an hour to meet with her and go over that stuff. And then right after that, you know, I'm getting phone calls about, you know, guardianships. But then I had to go down to a notary and get a affidavit notarized for the sale of a property that we have that we're an estate administrator for. So we're being pulled in different directions, you know, well, particularly me, because we have different lines other than just guardianships. So it's not every day is like The Pit, but I was, when I was watching the show, I'm like, that's a great show anyways, because on the second episode, they're bringing in guardianship, they're bringing in substitute decision making, and it really connected with me very well. So I would encourage watching that show.
Paya or Missy, anything like that?
very much so. I was gonna say not only being available, but being emotionally available to multiple personalities of different people, sometimes multiple personalities in the same person. But being able to deal with the professional aspect, which is the hospitals, the nursing home, the business offices, but also being able to deal with family members who don't want to be guardians, but want to micromanage you as the guardian. Or, you know, that just different aspects of it. So I agree with that. I'm more so all over the place, visiting people, going to care conferences, on the phone care conferences, on the phone with business offices, Social Security, it's a pain in my butt. But just being able to apply for different resources for people, being able to answer questions on the go, on vacation, in your sleep, wherever. So I agree with all of that.
I'll kind of go off of what you said now on this one too, kind of triggers that we have a title as a guardian, but we wear so many hats. I think we have to be accountants. We have to know the medical field. We have to know Social Security, medical assistance. Sometimes we're asked to do forensic accounting for money that went missing that we spend hours on that no charges are ever, nothing is done about it. We spend, I guess you look at a guardian as you're visiting the client, you're paying their bills, but there's so much more to that that I don't think people realize. Like you're a social worker. I have no social worker degree, but I'm counseling family, I'm counseling our client, counseling my employees who are burnt out from a day. I think all day long you're bombarded with emails and like the care managers, it's what we call our guardians, care managers. They're coming, I have this issue, I have that issue. I'm solving problems all day long. I'm there I wait till they're all done. They're talking in the morning. So I come later and I stay late. So I go home at 7, 8 o'clock at night and I just turn Netflix on and numb my brain because all day long you're like, ooh.
Yes.
Well, thank you all. And I think that gives a glimpse of what all of you are dealing with that a lot of people don't realize, and how difficult. It's not just looking at reports. It's not just paying bills. There's so much more to it. I'm going to build off of something, Payasem. Can you share some perspectives about what it's like working with family members? You mentioned about different personalities. You mentioned about different situations you might run into. I'm going to pass this first to Edith. If you could share any stories that you've had working with any family members or been in events with family members that you could share with the group.
Where do I begin? Lots of communication with families, and we act as co-guardian with family members. And I've even asked for guardianships for me to be removed so that in place there's a family member who's suitable, that's since been identified, that wasn't initially, that I could say, hey, let family first, you're going to know grandpa's wishes better than I will if in fact you have that better relationship and if you can manage this, especially when it comes to person. But in some cases, that's just not possible. Either there's no family at all, or we have family members who have very nefarious intentions, we'll say. And I had a case recently with that where I never had really much of any contact with the family at all. They were absent, and intentionally so, because I was appointed as guardian, because they just weren't present. And then I find out, well, it's also because they made their parents homeless. They had sold mom's house and dad's house under a power of attorney that was suspiciously notarized, we'll say, sold their house and said, oh, mom, dad, you're going to come live with us. And it was hours away from where they were from. They're already at this point showing early signs of dementia. So they're confused. They're like, no, we don't want to be here. And they don't understand that they're home, and all of their contents were sold. So somehow they were tricky enough that my clients came back down to Delaware County area in southeastern Pennsylvania from up above the Poconos. So that was a bit of a bus ride. And they found their way, get to their house. So they had the wherewithal to figure all this out, only to be like, well, why can't we get in? And the Office of Aging was called, and that's how the guardianship began. We then learned that, oh, wait a minute, there's been some transfers from the accounts when you do the 5-year look back and you get all those bank statements, and it was clear as day. Like, okay, income in, income out. Income out goes to daughter-in-law's bank account. Okay, this is pretty obvious. And we had to place them in a long-term care facility for their own safety because technically they were homeless. So the Office of Aging had started all that. And then I stepped in and we start kind of making everything right with Medicaid to get them approved in spite of all of this missing money and sold asset. Then the wife dies. All of a sudden, family comes out of nowhere. Now, DA's office has already been notified of all of this theft, and they've already started a case. We have the funeral. All of a sudden, everybody from the family comes out, including the family members who took the house, took the bank account money, and so forth. And I'm sitting there with my client, graveside. He's all upset. They've been married over 70 years, mind you, if that tells you anything. So he's just devastated. And I have 2 staff people with me. And one of them was hanging back, and she's overhearing a conversation with the son who took the house and worked with his wife to take all the bank funds, and basically had told this other gentleman, who he believed was his son, to say, well, if you want me to take care of that, I can while we're here. And then there's the grandson saying, oh, you want me to go get my rifle at the truck? And then my case manager's like, who are you talking about? And then she kind of had this aha moment like, oh, good Lord, you really think that's going to solve your problem? You can get rid of the guardian and there's not going to be a hearing and there's not going to be a trial and you're going to be able to like it was craziness. What desperate people can think, I suppose, is, I never really kind of took it as a super real threat, but you just don't know, right? And that's the danger in all of this is we do get in the way. And, I've had lots of clients in the past, kind of always step in and try to make those blank threats, but at least they were more obvious about it and said, oh, this is your office address. Oh, this is your home address or whatever. And they would try to look my staff up as well, thinking, oh, well, if we can get rid of the guardian, if we can show that they're not capable, oh, they'll put us back in place and we can continue doing what we were doing. So that's where I feel is, sometimes working with family members can be great and you can get cooperation and background and everything else that you would ever want to know about your client. And then there's the other side where if you're getting in their way because you were appointed to stop them, and I'm sure you see this a lot as well, being a fiduciary is, we're stopping that. Yeah, we're going to be the target now.
Missy, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, we've had cases, a case like that where our care manager has received threats through the night, all hours of the night, nasty sort of things. And the example I use, we went back to a review hearing, I think 3 times because the family kept asking for them. They had initially been appointed guardian. The one brother had siphoned morphine from our client in the hospital. So they've been removed and they would report us to aging. They would have review hearings and we continued to go back and they allowed them to keep asking for a review hearing with no end in sight. And the judge actually ordered supervised visits with the family because they had been kicked out of the facility. And so they couldn't come in without supervision per the facility, not per us. And so the judge ordered supervised visits. He ordered the facility to supervise those visits, which we all know that facilities are short-staffed. They don't have time or the resources to do that. So that puts that on us. And it was a half hour, I think it was more than our regular visits, which is twice a month for sure. So that's extra time we're spending, but we're still getting the $300 a month MA rate. That's on top of all the phone calls, all the issues we're dealing with this family. I mean, the brother was with a bullhorn and a sign out in front of the facility protesting when they couldn't care for him either. But so we had to supervise. And I think that's a problem that we are I feel that people should be connected to their families within reason. They have to still be reasonable humans too. So why are we being punished? I feel like we are being punished sometimes because they can't behave. Like if you can't behave, then why are we rewarding them? Or should they pay for our extra time? You know, I think that has been an issue. I have down, I'm gonna take too much time. But with railroads, like the family was exploiting and we cut off the money when we took over it, and we filed to become rep payee with the railroad. And they're like, the son's filing his reports, he's doing fine, he's doing the right things. I said, well, I don't know what he's putting on the reports, but here are the bank statements. This is another thing I will advocate for on the court reports, is having bank statements, because anyone can put any number in there. But here are the bank statements, and here's the $35,000 bill that they owe the facility. And she said, I'll get back to you. And within hours, they're like, we're appointing you and we're calling the AG's office about this. So we got a nasty email, the facility and us, saying the family member saying, I wish the most horrible cancer death upon you that is possible. So like, because we cut off the money. So you want to work with the family, but you know, in cases where you're cutting off their income, things get ugly and we're still expected to work with them, and it's not always easy.
Thank you. And I think these stories are tough to hear. There's a lot of stories where the family is very helpful, but it's good to hear that not every family member is going to be as helpful to the guardian as we hope, especially from the court's perspective and everybody else. We hope that's going to work nicely, but it doesn't always happen that way. Moving past working with family and dealing with family members, what about interacting as a guardian with like a medical institution, some type of facility, a nursing home, etc.? Paya, do you want to kick us off with that one?
Yes. Most of the time it's pretty good. You know, they're excited to see guardians. They're excited to see someone that's present, that's able to participate in care conferences and advocate. And then sometimes they're not so happy that you're advocating because they, you know, they want things their way, I guess. But just making sure that your person, you're advocating for your person and their wishes as much as possible. I mean, just because someone has dementia doesn't mean that they're still not in there. And if you're talking to them, most people with dementia, they have a good history. They have a good sense of their past. Just sitting there, letting them tell their stories and listening to what they might want and trying to respect that in their care. Sometimes it doesn't go too well with the facilities. Another thing, I see a lot of facilities, and I don't know if it's just me, you guys can let me know. They're pushed for changing code statuses before end of life is even like upon us, just because of age or just because they're in a nursing home, and having to advocate for that. Most of the people that I get are full codes, and if they're a full code, when I get them, then we have to go through some type of court hearing or emergency hearing or the court system to change it, and it has to be end of life. But I've been getting a real big push about that, not getting paid with certain facilities. Not getting the monthly fees that we're entitled to in our guardianship decree, but them hounding you about making sure that the income is coming to the facility. Just losing clothes, losing items, losing things that you're purchasing out of their monies. Just not being mindful that, you know, we're on a limited income with most of these people, and we're trying to make sure that they have everything that they need. Those are just a few of my issues.
Eric, anything like that?
Oh yeah, so I'll kind of separate this here. So kind of tagging on the long-term care facilities, there seems to be a lot more problems with them, more so on the business office side of things, you know, because those people are getting pressure to collect and to make sure they're getting paid. We understand all that, you know. And so, I mean, just this morning I got an email from somebody on my staff. We have a new case that we were just appointed to maybe a month or two ago. And the facility, and so we have to re-engineer this financial system. We have to apply to become rep payee. They had this this individual had like this way to go card or something like that. So those cards we find are very difficult to marshal and get information on. And so we're having a difficult time getting that. Something happened where that card got changed, or or was reissued or something. So the facility can't get the money off of it now. So, there's a problem here with the financial system. And before we can re-engineer it all, they're saying, well, if we can't get paid by the middle of the month, we're going to issue a discharge. So you know what I told my staff? I said, tell our social worker to make a referral to this facility. We got to do that sometimes. Just to, if you're gonna treat us that way, then we're going to take them away. And then all this debt was incurred prior to the guardianship. And so now when they come back and they start asking for money, I'm going to say, look, this is a debt that was to the individual, was prior to the guardianship. So, we'll try to resolve it as we can. But, if we can't resolve it, then you're going to have to collect through the estate at that point. So it's better to work with us than to be adversarial with us. All right. On the hospital side of things, the only problems I've really had with the hospitals is on discharge planning. There seems to be we're always looking for the least restrictive places. And I'm really talking about placement here. Okay. We've had a couple situations where we've gone in, we've evaluated the individual, and they are not a personal care home. But, the AAA has come in and has said that they're eligible to live in the community. So we have to have another person go out and do that options evaluation to get them nursing facility eligible. And so there seems to be a problem sometimes on the discharge planning with, okay, what's the appropriate placement for this person when they get discharged? And I remember one example specifically where we had this example where we were saying that, no, this person needs to go to a nursing home. And they're saying, no, they need to go to a personal care home. So we acquiesced, and we eventually found a personal care home for the individual with the help of the social worker. And within 2 weeks in a personal care home, they were back in the hospital, and then we were sending them to the nursing home. So it's just like, okay, look, we're all trying to work what's in the best interest of this individual. We don't think having them go to a personal care home, get into the situation, go back to the hospital is really in their best interest. So let's get them to the nursing home right now. But the doctors and everybody else at the hospitals are usually very great to work with and have no issues with them. So,
Thank you. Moving on, we talked a little bit, obviously, family members, medical institutions. What about financial institutions and banks? How's that experience been from a guardian's perspective? Edith, do you want to kick us off on that one?
I'm not a big fan of banks in general, unless I get my 5 years of statements. Thank you. Have a nice day. But I have, in many cases, gone to the bank, given the certified decree. I'm told, okay, everything's done. We sent it to legal. They sent it right back. Everything's thumbs up. Great. We're gonna lock this account, deposits only, until you can get everything rerouted. This is like their original account. And this just happened very recently where my client was then just like a weekend or so ago, got picked up by a grandson, who's, mind you, not a grandson, went to the bank and she took out $500 from her account. And then I find out and I'm like, excuse me? First of all, how did my client leave the facility and not be told? Like we should have provided consent. We don't know this gentleman. Second, she allegedly gave $200 of the $500 to this gentleman. And so I immediately went to the bank and made a little scene, I'll admit, with the branch manager, who was the one who put me on the account back in February. So I'm like, so what exactly happened? What went wrong? How did my name somehow get removed? Because you wouldn't have given it to me if I would not have gotten 5 years of statements had I not been put on that account. But then all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, that's our mistake. No, that's just a little more than a mistake. And you're going to give my client her money back. And you're going to replace it in her account, especially the $200 that went to this alleged man. Now we have, a police report getting filed, and we have the nursing home thankfully on board now. But, there's been many a times where I've gone to the bank, we've been told that we're on the account and we're not. But now we have limited guardianships. Banks don't seem to know what to do with that. And if you've had a different experience, please share, because I had, it was one of the first ones where I had limited guardianship. And this gentleman, we knew he was being financially exploited. That was how the referral came in. And the bank had sent him letters saying, we have some concerns. Could you please come into the branch? He even got a letter from the U.S. Postal Inspector. We have concerns. We've seen some transactions within your mail. We'd like to talk to you. And he was terrified. He didn't know what to, it was like, And we found these letters kind of hidden in his house that he'd kind of stuffed away in a drawer because he didn't want to deal with it. Because when we found it, we asked him. We went to the bank and they said, well, you're only limited guardian. We can give you statements. You can monitor the account if you would like, but no, we can't have you writing checks out of it or anything like that. I'm watching over $200,000 escape his account, and there is nothing I can do about it. I call my attorney calls Judge's Chambers. We need to have a hearing. And by the time we had that hearing, so much time had already passed that the bank account went into the negatives. So when I go to the bank, say, hey, can I have a current statement? I'm about to go have a review hearing and I want to show the activity. It said, now mind you, this was a code, which they did not explain later, that it said negative $888,888.88. Well, I took that as an, oh my God, I don't know that I have that much coverage on my liability policy and my house isn't worth that much. I don't have that much in savings. How am I going to get all this done? And I was terrified. And I was I was early in my career when this happened. And the bank never really explained, oh, no, don't worry about that. That's just a code. Lots of alcohol in Ativan later. I found out that, I wasn't held responsible for that money. But the bank only froze his account when it affected their bottom line, not when we told them, okay, you see that check for $20,000? Yeah, that's not him. You see that for $17,000? That's not him. And we went through it all with the branch man, but they read it as a limited guardian, and we can't take action like we would if we were a permanent plenary. And then, needless to say, the bank also allowed this man to take out in cash. I think the grand total was about $66,000. Well, if my mom went into a bank at 85 years old and said, hi, can I take a withdrawal, please, for $15,000 or for $40,000? I'd like to think that the banker would be like, what's going on, Mrs. Shapiro? You got some problem? How can I help? No, they went and they actually gave him either the bank check or they gave him the cash, and we found evidence of it. And I'd never once have ever been able to get the bank to be kind of held to the carpet on, you allowed this to happen. You gave him this money. You should have asked questions. He wasn't asking for $40. He was asking for $40,000. So there, when you have, even as a guardian, your hands can be tied. And we're here to protect our clients. And sometimes the banks don't let us do that.
Missy, anything you'd like to add?
I think when we had our talk, I was dealing with Synchrony Bank at that time, and it's a kind of an online bank because you can't find a local one. So we were trying to call for, first of all, they acknowledged our emergency order and they kind of held the account, but they wouldn't allow us to close the account and which is where most of our clients' funds were. We were trying to place him. The facility needed a month payment up front, but we had no money. And so for 3 months, we were back and forth. They're like, well, you need a PIN. Well, we didn't get the PIN in the mail. They mailed it. We didn't get it in the mail. We call 2 weeks later. Like, there has to be some other way because you keep sending a PIN and we're not getting it. You say you're sending it to our address. We tried they had an app or I think it was email, and I had to use my face and put my ID and all that stuff in. Wouldn't read it. I was like, I don't know what else to do. It matches my ID. Like, do you want my blood, my fingerprints, my firstborn child? I don't know what to do, but we need this money. He needs out of the hospital. He needs to be able to pay a facility. And we went around and around 3 months, and I asked for supervisors, and the supervisor, this is where I keep preaching education. The supervisor at the bank, she said, well, we have to send it, because I think we were arguing they were going to send something Federal Express, which you can't use a P.O. box, you have to a street address. And she kept saying, it's not on the order. I said, but I have the order. Right here it says 34 South Market Street, because I thought we were arguing about P.O. box or the street address. I was like, I have the order. Right here it says it. She goes, no, the order doesn't say that. It says P.O. box, whatever. I was ready to bang my head. I may have actually at that point banged my head off my desk trying to understand, like, how are we not figuring this out? And she goes, she was talking about the fax cover sheet. Because I said, update the mailing address to the P.O. box. And she kept calling it an order. I was like, maybe we could have saved ourselves. I think we were on the phone at least 4 times for at least an hour each, sometimes an hour and a half, trying to come up with a solution. I said, we would have saved ourselves 10 hours of time had you learned the language that, like, you're talking, we have a guardianship order. That's what, in my head, I think you're not, some people will call it like a instruction letter. But I was like, it says it on the order. But she said, no, it doesn't on the order. I was like, oh, you mean the fax cover sheet? So, like, there's a language barrier there. And I think that's where I think education is very important. And then the same with, like Edith said, I had an issue with Fulton Bank too. They take forever to authorize, to approve our orders. I think it was 2 months. And you know what can happen in 2 months. And I've learned to say, you need to lock this down until you approve it, because sometimes they won't even do that because there's joint owners on the account. They once left the daughter write a check for $10,000 after I had presented the order to them, and her name was in there that she was, So yeah, it can be very frustrating because you're trying to protect them, and your hand, like you just said, your hands are tied sometimes, even with an order.
Thank you, Missy. Eric, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to give you guys a visual when I was going to go bang my head off the wall, because that's what it feels like sometimes. But in all seriousness, I think it really comes down to communication and expectations. We had a lot of issues with the banks. I think the harder ones to deal with now are like the stocks, and those, computer share. Man, I think I almost broke my desk one time. Seriously, because I was like 7 or 8 months. I talked to him about 5 times the same thing. I said the same thing 5 times, and finally, I was able to get through. But working with the local banks, once we understand what their expectations are, what their processes are, that kind of helps things out. Like I know PNC Bank, it usually takes a week or 2 weeks now to get approval from them. Initially we were walking in, beating them over the head with our order, saying, "Give us, access now. We're working for our clients here. We're trying to protect these people." So. But, just the expectations and the communications helps out with that.
Thank you. And I think a few of the panelists touched on, a lot of it is education to financial institutions, bank, medical facilities. That's an area the courts, our office, working with judges that are part of the advisory council and others, are really trying to improve that through possibly better language on orders in the future, clearer language, and having that dialogue with these institutions, with these banks, that what is that barrier? What's that language barrier? What do you need in the orders to expedite so that the people on this panel and all the guardians in the audience and watching this can get faster access to help their clients and make sure that they're protecting them? So that's something that we're aware of. We're trying to work with banks as well. But to move on here, I want to open this up really to anyone on the panel. I think it's important for the audience to hear, we always hear the term hidden costs, and guardianship's no different. What type of costs do you see? This could be financial, this could be emotional, personal impact that maybe you didn't expect getting into when you were first appointed a guardian and you first took on these roles. So I'll open up anyone that would like to kick us off.
I'll start. I think we already touched on a lot of things here. It's a high stress work environment, really, because you're on call 24 hours and there's great responsibility that we hold for these individuals. and the margins, like I said earlier, are very slim if there are margins at all. And so that leads to like a no life, work balance. And so trying to maintain that and manage that is very difficult.
Anyone else?
I agree with that as well. You could always sound like me. I do have a life and a guardian balance, but just having to pay out of pocket sometimes, like if you have, I had an elderly lady whose ex-husband had stolen all her money. So having to rebuild and save money and get him out of the picture and just trying to build back up her finances, sometimes I found myself coming out of pocket just to make sure she was okay, whether it's paying for a private caregiver or buying groceries that month or whatever the case may be, so that she's all right, and praying to God that I get it on the back end of something. Or having out of country expenses. I had a fella who had coins that were kept in Canada, and he died, but his wife was still here, and somebody was going after the coins and having to fly to Canada, meet with the bank, spend my own money to get there, deal with that, come back, praying to God we get paid on the back end. But just having the, I guess the human side of me is like, at the end of the day, I got to make sure you're all right. So if this is what we need right now and I got it, then you got it. But definitely emotionally, that's a big, big, big expense that you think about it, it's there. I just don't think you know how much is there. And then having to come home and deal with your kids, your family, whoever it may be. Like you said, you go home and watch Netflix. I go home and get in my bathtub, silence. So it's just, I think that's probably equal, if not more, than the financial aspect of it. So,
Any other comments? Okay.
Definitely agree with that, and taking on expenses that, we get new clients and they're like, they have no clue, they're coming from the hospital or they have bugs, and our care manager was like, hey, train them to check if they have money or not. I was like, I don't even know that yet, just get it. If they don't, we'll cover it. But I think, and my care manager, sometimes I took them out to eat, but don't worry about they'll pay it out of their own pockets. So I think a lot of times.
Thank you for sharing that. It's impactful to hear. I mean, that extra, you go the extra mile to really do that. We touched on a lot so far about the challenges that the Guardians are facing, but we know, especially for everyone that's attending this summit, Pennsylvania in the past decade has made a lot of improvements in guardianship, elder justice, and getting access to the courts. I really want to pose this to the panel. Overall, in the past 5 years, what changes have you really seen that has impacted guardianship, either in your role or dealing with the courts? And really, how has that impacted, either made your job a little easier to do or any new challenges? Kind of a very broad question, but what have you seen kind of change over the past 5 years? Pam?
I think the appointment of court-appointed attorneys has been helpful. It provides another entity that can help advocate for the same person, somebody that you can kind of contact. I know I do. I contact them to bounce questions, concerns, issues off of. I think that that's very helpful. Even with the oversight from Older Adult Protective Services, PCA, because guardians get complained about a lot. We get accused of, especially financial exploitation. Mm-hmm. They got my money, where's it going, blah, blah, blah. And just having them complain and somebody coming back, well, we need to find out where this is. I'm like, here, this bank statement is here, this happened here. I think that oversight is not annoying to me because it protects me as much as it protects them. Well, my person. So I think some of that additional oversight to protect your ward, it eventually protects you. So.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll say something here. The representation is huge, and I agree with that 100%. I think the review hearings are big as well. Ultimately, the judge whose case this is the ultimate guardian, and so we as a guardianship or guardian need to have a good relationship with that judge and communication with that judge, so that everybody kind of knows what's going on. I think the review hearings help with that.
Either Missy, anything to add?
No, I think the review hearings, like you said, to piggyback is huge. I think that, this way, especially with these 90-day review hearings after you first get a case, I'm seeing more and more cases of that. And it's helpful because within 90 days, if you're having difficulty getting access to an asset or getting the cooperation of, let's say, CompuShare or some other entity like that where they have no physical place to, run into, it's helpful because then it's an opportunity to say, Your Honor, listen, could you make a phone call or could you, write something in the order that specifically says, and they'll do it. And, and that's been really, really helpful, even with some federal entities like the VA. I mean, I've had the VA straight up tell me, "Oh, I'm sorry, that's a county order. No, I'm sorry, we're federal. We don't do that." And I'm like,
Right.
But I've also had a judge literally say, "You know what? I got a guy here. Call whoever." And next thing you know, oh, gee, thank you so much. And if you don't have those review hearings, you'll never know. And if you don't have an attorney representing the IP to kind of help you get through all that, then you're right. It's a very, very different game, like it was 8 years ago versus now.
And that's something just to piggyback off what you said. I mean, ultimately, the court's appointing you all as professional guardians, as guardians in general. Judges really don't like their orders to be ignored by anybody. So the judges are going to have the backs of the guardians of dealing with a facility or dealing with a bank or a medical institution, family members, whatever it may be. Go back to the court, have the review hearings. These are becoming more and more prominent to make sure that this person's cared for, that you have the authority as guardian, that the court has your backing to make sure that those jobs are being done. Moving on, another topic that comes up, and I'd love to hear the panel's perspective. Mental health and guardianship are very often intertwined, and it creates a lot of sets of unique challenges for a guardian dealing with someone that's going through a mental health episode or different challenges in that area. Can anyone on the panel share experience with this? How has that impacted making decisions on that person's behalf or kind of dealing with any facilities that are working with them through mental health crises?
Oh,
Anyone?
I'll start. I actually just had a recent one where my gentleman does have mental health issues, and just making sure that having to advocate for them to make sure that the facility doesn't just want to get rid of them because they're a problem, versus making sure that they're taking their medication or making sure that you're following up on their plan of care and having to hold them accountable to that. I had a gentleman who he refused his medications 18 times. I was not aware, I was not informed of that, I was not told of that until he was at the front door and they had to call the cops like, he's trying to get out of here, he's not appropriate for this facility, he's not this and he's not that. They had to call in a crisis team and they're like, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you didn't do this. And just as a guardian, making sure that you're documenting everything and taking down everything. I was like, well, I spoke to such and such at this time and this time and this time. When did you guys call me about the 18 missed medications? Because that's important. He has a psych history, he has a psych background. Now you're saying that, he just needs to be put out. Well, I'm confused. Like, he needs his medication. So just being on top of that and advocating for your person to make sure that they're not just being pushed over or pushed out the door because they're too much of a headache.
Yeah, I think that there's people think that we as guardians can 302 involuntarily commit people. So, when there's a mental health situation going on, they're calling us saying, hey, there's a mental health situation. And we're like, well, you know what? We're here to advocate for the individual. So, we can't admit them into the hospital. That's a conflict of interest, so we explain that to them. And we said, but you're the one who's actually experiencing it in the middle of it. Why don't you call crisis and have them come out? And if crisis deems that they need to be sent to the hospital, then you could be the witness to the 302. We just had a situation where it's an individual. She was living in a personal care home, and we got a call from the personal care home that, hey, this woman locked herself in the bathroom. She's stuffing the toilet with toilet paper. All my lines are clogged, and we can't get her out of the bathroom. I had to have one of my employees break into the bathroom, and she was in there, and so, we're giving her a 30-day notice. And So I talked to my guardian advocate, and that's what we call our folks, guardian advocates. I talked to her and I said, look, tell them to call crisis, have the crisis folks come out. And they ultimately, the facility, the personal care home, ultimately 302'd her, was able to 302 her. And she went into the hospital, got the meds fixed, worked out, and is back to personal care home. And I believe that they've rescinded that 30-day notice since then. But I think a lot of people just, again, think that we can 302 people and get people into the mental health hospitals. And what they don't understand is the mental health statutes are different than the guardianship statutes. So we can't even go to the judge and ask them for an order to even have them committed to someplace. I mean, there's not a whole lot we can do when it comes to mental health issues, But I think when we're dealing with somebody that has mental health issues, it's really important. And we always try to slow things down, and kind of work at their level, and make sure that, we're building trust with the individual, that we're not doing things too fast for them. One case that comes to mind, about 2 years ago, we were appointed on a case, and man, we found out that this woman was originally from New York, and she was in the mental health system up in New York. We couldn't get any of the records from there. But anyways, we were aware that there were some mental health issues there. She was living in this dilapidated house that was a hoarding situation. It was terrible. None of us would live there, but she was comfortable there, okay? And her ex-boyfriend, actually deceased boyfriend, owned the house. And so she's taking little bits and pieces of her SSI money every month and trying to pay the taxes on the house. And she's telling us that, hey, his spirit lives in the house and he wants me to stay there. So we're like, oh, okay, well, hey, look, we're going to try and do everything we can to help make that happen. So we send people in to evaluate the house. It's going to cost $1 billion to rehab it, and so we try to explain this. Oh, well, he wants me to live here, And so we finally get her to the doctors. We get some medications in place. She starts to come around and she starts to kind of understand, So now we start kind of re-engineering the financial system. So we have to kind of talk her off the ledge on some of those things, And on the financial side, because she had very limited assets, we got a letter from an attorney out in Arizona saying, hey, there's a house out here that it was a beneficiary deed that her mom owned a property. She had put a beneficiary deed in place when she bought it and named, our individual as a beneficiary. So when she passed away, our individual inherited the house over in Arizona. But 4 or 5 years had gone by, and so no one was keeping up the house. She got letters from attorneys, and she gave me like some things, and I really couldn't discern it. But after we got that letter from the attorney that, hey, the HOA is foreclosing on this house, we were able to step in, we were able to marshal it. It was we actually sold it for about $400,000. So now we use the proceeds. And this took about 1.5 years. So this poor woman was living in that dilapidated house because there's really nothing we could do. We didn't want to change it because she knew how to live in that, okay? But we ended up buying her a new house. We got her qualified for Medicaid because we put a special needs trust in place as well. Got her qualified for Medicaid. And now she has home community-based services coming in to help her out, She's got 5 cats too. 3 of them were found in the freezer, so a lot of things here, a lot of things. But we got to slow it down, work at their level, communicate with them, build the trust, find out what really triggers them and try not to be a trigger.
Anyone else on the panel? Kind of wrap up this conversation.
I think we're very blessed, for lack of a better word, in Philadelphia area, because I don't know that this exists anywhere else in Pennsylvania, but we've actually, through the Office of Behavioral Health, have actually created units within select skilled nursing facilities and long-term care specifically to work with people with mental illness and co-occurring cognitive impairments who may or may not be under guardianship. And that's really made the difference in the sense where now you have staff working in a unit that are specially trained, that went to work in that unit wanting to work with that population, where many times that's not the case, and you'll have aides and nurses in a skilled nursing facility like, I can't deal with that. Okay, these are people who have that interest, who want to work with these folks, and they're more patient, they're better at getting medication compliance out of our clients, and thankfully that's a model that is getting expanded into other nursing facilities across the Philadelphia County area. And I'm hoping it's a model that just runs like wildfire across the state because it's so needed. And I've had clients who, like you described, or you described in particular about not taking medications. Sometimes it's just about talking to them. That's really all it is. It's just a verbal redirection. I've had some overworked and frustrated nurses. Maybe they were burnt out. They were like, well, I can't restrain. And you don't need to restrain the man. Just talk to him, tell him what it is and explain it. And so now we have, units that have staff that are so well trained in this. And my clients that are in these units do so much better. And they're just living a better quality of life for being in a skilled nursing facility. So I think seeing more of those dual diagnosis units out there, that works with, the Office of Aging, making sure they're nursing facility eligible, but at the same time can meet their mental health needs is idyllic. We've seen it in other states and now it's finally here and now we just need to run it across.
Okay, thank you all. Before we get into Q&A, I just want to thank the panel for really being willing to share these stories and these perspectives. And hopefully it shines a light that it's not just paperwork that a guardian's doing. It's not just the order that the court gives. There's a real personal impact there. There's emotional impact. There's financial impact. We heard multiple stories about things being paid out of a guardian's pocket with the quote unquote hope that they will get reimbursed in the future. That's a real challenge in an area where oftentimes guardians are appointed on cases where there may not be any money to pay the guardian. So trying to figure out how that's going to get reimbursed and the emotional impact. You heard stories about family members that really, really didn't like the guardian and let them know it in different ways or through threats. These are things that the average person doesn't hear about. That we hear guardianship stories in the media, we hear all these negative impacts, but there's so much more than just that negative impact. There's those day-to-day interactions that true impact, not only in the guardian, the family members and society, and ultimately on that person that's at risk. They're putting their lives out there to try to help that person. And it's great that we're able to share it. And these guardians were willing to step forward to share these perspectives that we often don't hear in the media. We don't hear in our day-to-day lives. It's so important to have all of that messaging out there as well. So before I open up the Q&A, I just want to again thank the members for joining us here on the panel.